You had an argument with a friend of yours. They owe you an apology because they wronged you. And instead of getting an apology and instead of getting any closure, they block you on social media and they block you on your phone. What do you do next? Okay, so this is what happens, right? You had a situation take place. Maybe there was some conflict, some argument with a friend of yours, and you were expecting to be able to communicate about this afterwards, have a conversation, get it out in the open, clear the air. But what happens? You try to do that. You try to reach out to them. You try to text them. You try to call them. You realize they've blocked you. You go to Facebook and you realize you're no longer friends. What do you do? I bet a lot of people have been there. I've been there myself, where there's no closure, no communication, and you thought this person was actually your friend. So then guess what happens? Your mind starts going. What are you going to do next? Well, let's talk real quick about the things you probably don't want to do, and then let's talk about the things that you should. The first thing you think about, and I'll tell you straight up, is you go to that friends list on Facebook and you start looking at all the friends that they've poached of yours, right? How many of your friends have they taken of yours? Oftentimes, they didn't even know any of those people when you first met, and now they have 50, 100 of them. You want to sit there and put a group text on Facebook and say, this person's a jerk. Don't be friends with them. They're a weenie. Defriend them. I hate them, right? First thought, right? But you know what? Bad idea. It's going to come to bite you in the butt, okay? It's also starting World War III, and another thing is it makes you look bad. It just makes you look bad. Don't do that. You know, another thought that you think is, you know what, I'm just going to show up where they're at and I'm going to start an argument right there about how they're a jerk off and they don't even want to have a communication. Probably not a good idea again. These ideas are good in our head, especially when we're filled with anger and resentment and we just want to just get it out there and just bleh. Not a good idea, okay? Those thoughts have gone through my mind as well, okay? I get it. But there's a lot of these things that we can think about. Showing up at people's houses, all those types of things. Again, not a good idea. So what do we do in a situation where somebody has left us high and dry, feeling bad, they've hurt us, we deserve an apology, but there deserves to be a communication because real people communicate about things, right? That's what adults do. So what do we do? How do we get over it by ourselves? Okay, because for right now, there's zero communication from the other person. Okay, well, I'm going to help you with that because I did it myself. We'll walk through it real quick. I'll give you some advice, and hopefully this will help you. You know, the first thing you want to do is realize that a real friend wouldn't do this. Okay, you have real friends that you've had conversations with that have turned into conflicts. You've had real friends that you've had arguments with that you worked it out. You've talked about it, you've overcome it, you've come to an agreement, you maybe cried about it, maybe, whatever happened, but at the same point, your relationship grew from it, okay? That's normal. We're not always going to agree with stuff. There's going to be arguments. But when somebody closes down like that, that means that they truly weren't your friend, but they're also not a friend of themselves, okay? They don't understand how to communicate. They don't want to communicate. Perhaps they're a raging narcissist that doesn't want to be told that information, or somebody that's avoiding the truth of what's going on in their own life. You'll also find many people run from situations like that. They've never dealt with conflict, and they're probably not ever going to deal with conflict. That's part of their MO, okay? And so in that situation, they're going to run like the wind. You're not going to hear from them. You know, another thing to think about, too, that really helped me is to realize the fact that there were red flags prior to this. And I know you're like, Ashley, thanks, this isn't helping me right now. This could have helped me earlier. I get it, but you can learn from the situation and use it in the future, okay? So you have to admit there were red flags earlier in this friendship. There were red flags that were telling you to be careful. There were things about this person that were not only irritating, but, well, quite honestly, you just didn't like. Okay, but what did you do? You let it go. You put blinders onto it. You kind of just said, you know what, things will get better, no big deal. But they didn't. Okay, and the thing is that there was already problems in the relationship, and I think that the reason why you didn't say anything before is, one, you were probably scared to. Two, you might have actually thought they weren't going to take it very well, and obviously, if this was going down the same path as the argument that you had that they cut you off from, Obviously, you probably had an instinct that this was going to happen. But 3, this person has a very thin skin. Okay? And in relationships, we got to be thick-skinned. We got to be able to communicate and talk. And I've got to be able to listen to people tell me, hey, Ashley, maybe you should work on this, or advice for me. And I take that advice. Sometimes I'm not always like, oh, thank you so much. But I do listen, I do take it, and then I do appreciate it later on for the most part. And I feel that oftentimes in these situations when that hasn't happened, that person isn't ready to change, and they're not going to change, and you're not going to help them change. You know, another thing that I want you to ask yourself is, why did you get into this particular relationship to begin with? I think oftentimes we enter relationships that are unhealthy because they appear normal. Okay? Were you raised by somebody with this type of personality trait? Were you around this type of personality trait at a young age? And so when that person came into your life, it's like you were open arms with them because you're so used to it. I think oftentimes we allow unhealthy relationships in our life because they're normal, right? And so you have to ask yourself a question. 1, why haven't I realized that this is a pattern in my life? 2, why haven't I begun to stand up for myself in these patterns, right? Because we're learning from these patterns, but now it's time to begin to stand up for ourselves. If you were raised by a narcissist and you're constantly dealing with narcissistic situations in your life with other people, and this becomes a pattern. So you had a father that was a narcissist, several different people you dated were narcissists, several different friends that you have are narcissists, and it's a constant basis. You really need to look at that and ask you, why are you bringing these types of people into your life? And do you not have any boundaries to deal with? I know for a fact I've dealt with that personally. And I knew that having boundaries with the narcissist was extremely hard for me because it was extremely normal for me. Okay? And what I've realized lately is that I have a tendency of glossing over the red flags because it's normal. And I want it to work. And I figure that the person will just change over time, or it'll just get easier and better. But as you know, it doesn't. It gets worse. Okay? And so that's another red flag and another thought to look at. You know, another thing to look at too is really focusing on you, your self-esteem, your self-value, okay? When we enter these relationships with people like that would just turn on you on a dime, right? You have to really think about it and ask yourself, how did I get here and why? And why am I allowing that type of person around me when I have the ability to have all kinds of different friends around me who actually care about me and consider my thoughts and feelings, okay? And I think this is very important. And I know you're saying, but actually it hurts. And I feel like I have no closure. And I feel like they were a total jerk off. And here I am holding the bag. I understand. But we've learned a valuable lesson. People not to get into relationships and friendships with, correct? Another thing that we've learned as well is that we've got to be on top of our friendships. Right when something happens that you're not happy with, that goes against your boundaries, that goes against who you are, you've got to stand up. You've got to say exactly how you feel, because the more we allow this to happen, the more it will happen because we become the doormat. Do you understand that? And that's not a good place to be. And oftentimes when you become the doormat, there comes a time when you just blow up because you've had too much to deal with from this person for so long, and they have given you very little respect because it's all about them. And you need to ask yourself, how can I change my pattern of behavior? I can't change them, so what do I change about me to bring people around me that are actually positive and giving instead of people that are takers and weenies that hide behind their computer and their phone, don't want to deal with any sort of conflict because they can't, because they would be completely deconstructed at this point in time. Do you see what I'm saying? Their brain would blow off if they had to deal with any conflict because they don't even know who they are, okay? And they hide behind this powerful persona when they're not really that powerful. So I recently dealt with this situation in my own life. I would love to get your perspective on how you've dealt with this. Have you dealt with somebody that has literally gone dark on you? They owe you an apology. They were a genuine ass to you, okay? They hurt your feelings, but what did they do? They walked out of your life with nothing. Poof. How did you deal with it? Because I've realized that living my true life is the only way to deal with it, by doing what's right by me, creating those boundaries, being true and honest with myself, but also realizing, why did I let that person in my life in the first place? Why did I let them get so close that they hurt me and then took off? Last but not least, you know what I've also realized? It's a huge lesson that I had to learn. I can't change them. I can only change myself. I can't change their actions, but I can change the way I feel about it. I can change the way I feel about it. So I'm not going to be reactive on Facebook. I'm not going to be reactive on social media. And I'm not going to call them out to everybody I know. But I'm going to live truly and honestly. And I'm going to do the right thing by me. And I'm also going to be very aware of those red flags when they come up and see them for what they are. Not try to sugarcoat the relationship. And also, I'm going to value my time more than to just give it to anybody. Okay, and I think this is very important, and I hope that this has helped you as well. And I wish that I could take the pain away from you right now, but I've realized that we have to forgive ourselves for being in this relationship. And if you forgive yourself for falling for that, and you actually forgive yourself and actually go by solution, meaning I forgive myself and go deep and forgive yourself, but then turn around and make a solution not to get in a relationship with that same type of personality, and not try to be codependent and work on being who you are, I think you can offset this situation from happening in the future. And just remember one thing. It might hurt right now, but time will cure this situation. But better yet, you can help another person who's dealing with this. You can help get the word out on this, and also realize that that person who is avoiding you and ghosting you is full of fear and insecurity, and they're a half of a person because they don't know how to love, they don't understand what unconditional love is, and they have no idea how to deal with this situation. They'd rather cut you out because they're so scared of confronting themselves, because that's what it comes out to. Because remember, when we argue with somebody and we bring up their faults, we're mirroring them, we're explaining to them the situation. We want to have this conversation, but when somebody takes off, they don't want to have that conversation. They're not prepared to deal with it. And you need to look within and ask yourself, how did I get here? And what can I do next to not be in a relationship with this type of person again, and to safeguard myself from being hurt like this? Forgive yourself. Forgive the situation. Forgive them as well. The lesson's been learned. Now it's time to move on and move forward with our life, being true and honest in all of our friendships, giving unconditional love to others and ourselves, and realizing our true value is way better and way more valuable than being in a relationship with someone that'll do that to you. I hope this video has helped, and don't forget to continue to live your true life. Are you currently in a toxic relationship and unsure what the next day will bring? Have you often wondered if there's more to life than this? Do you suffer from self-esteem issues that you've had since you were a young child? Have issues or have difficulty speaking with your family? Do you feel surrounded by self-centered people? Seems as though you're always giving and they're always taking. If you've answered yes to any of these questions, you need some answers. The 10-day challenge to live your true life gives you the knowledge and techniques for creating boundaries in your life that help us to deal with family, as well as dealing with those narcissistic and toxic people in your life. It offers the insight into understanding and overcoming your self-esteem issues, and to begin to see for the first time your amazing value. You owe it to yourself to find the power within you.